Okay, so we have our first question over here for our panelists. So you were talking about skills. I think Victoria Lemieux has mentioned it. And for many of us who are archivists with a historical background of history, actually, or humanities, I would like to know, where do we start to learn which kind of skills to start to understand blockchain and this kind of domain, and start to communicate effectively with an IT expert who is building this kind of solution? So I see we don't have time for an engineering studies, but we should learn some kind of skills to be able to, well, deal with this, so to not be obsolete, so and not to drown in the effort. So what do we do?
Well, first of all, you are here, right? So the conference is like this, but I think that Lars also has an idea, right?
Yeah. I think the thing is that you have to feel the sense of urgency, and you have to see the value of this, and all of a sudden it comes to you automatically. And you don't have to be a top mathematician to understand the concept. And conceptual understanding is actually the core of it. For instance, when you look on debt, which is that's my thing. Debt is very different. In Germany, you have Schuldschein. So the debt instrument is connected to the house and not to the borrower. And you have to check. And the mechanism is very different. And all of a sudden, you get these challenges. And the challenges that you should look for the challenges, because they will kind of, you'll get lost. I promise you. So I think just having your background is as good as being a banker or a mathematician. It's just that you have to love the subject.
Can I just add to that? So I would just add to that one of the things that, as an educator, I've started to do is create multidisciplinary opportunities to bring archivists together with computer scientists, engineers, mathematicians. We did a summer institute at the University of British Columbia this summer on blockchain technology, and we ended it with a blockchain hackathon that everybody, including the archivists, the students that are archival science students, and library and information science students were required to participate in. So everyone had an opportunity to roll up their sleeves and get involved, even though the students didn't necessarily all start off being able to code or understand the technology. By the end of it, they did, and they have all gotten jobs or work supporting now industry partners that we have. So I think that's also important too. Roll up your sleeves, get involved, actually working with the technology at a very technical level, because otherwise you do understand it at the conceptual level. That's important to start, but you won't understand it well enough to be able to influence the design of the technology, which is what I think we have to do as archivists. At the back.
Hi. So I was at an event earlier on this week, the PASIG event, which I'm sure many of you were aware of. And I put a challenge to that event yesterday, which was, given the longevity of archival collections, thousands of years, literally in some cases, and given the need to keep public records for very long periods of time, our own, in Scotland, our own land registry is celebrating its 400th year, and it's still using the records that were generated 400 years ago to govern land transactions that happen today. How, with the complexity of the technology we're discussing in this section, how can we have confidence that our collection will outlive the systems in which we are currently investing?
The word that we are looking for is simplicity. We-
That's precisely my point.
You have to find a language, a representation language that is so simple and so core in its elements that you can, it will actually survive from one year to another and from one technology to another. But this is probably something for the tech guys. This is
So I think that's precisely my point, and my concern is that it's very interesting, and I think this technology is brilliant. It has lots of good properties, but until we, as an archival institutions, can start to abstract away from that complexity a little bit and get something, as you say, a simpler representation, we're looking at a fundamental challenge. And I'm very worried about quickly adopting highly complex technology.
I could also add a comment to that. At the moment you decided to go digital, there is actually no way back. So you have to plan for the future, and the future is bringing the conversion from one file format to another, the migration from one media to another, the emulation, the virtualization, you name it. So you have to think about what would be the most appropriate or archival file formats or archival media. It will not solve the problem, but you will be able to prolong the period between the migrations or conversions. I don't think we have a choice here anymore. So we are in a digital world and we have to cope with it and do the best we can. Of course, one of the ways to do that is to try to influence the technology when it is developing, and that is why some of us are involved in the standardization, which I think is a good thing to have our archival voice there, because we have to be there and try to influence it. That's my line of thinking. I don't believe that the digital version of today's register will be available in 400 years, but it might be sufficient to be here in another 10 years and to use the most appropriate methods to transfer it or to convert it to another version in order to preserve the authenticity, reliability, integrity, and so on.
So in a way, this is the exact same problem we've been facing in digital preservation. If you think about what we were looking at in the 2000 to 2010 period, was basically the question, is the relational database stable enough to maintain our archives over thousands of years? And relational databases are already half a century old. Blockchains are less than a decade old. So I think you're wise to be cautious.
Yeah, just bluntly saying that when you look at the implementation, so I suppose you are also going through the agencies and seeing what the agencies are capable of doing with IT. Bluntly saying, there are incredibly stupid things every now and then. And that's what the archivist, or the digital archivist at least, is, in my opinion. It's a emergency brake for the rapid IT development. And if you want it or not, but the only thing we can do in a digital society is to try to be there where innovation happens as much as possible, and you it's not really taught anywhere, I suppose, but you need to develop a skill of really quickly identifying out of all these nasty technical details, is this technology or is this aspect of a technology relevant in regard to digitalization or not? And that's exactly the kind of exercise I wanted to do for blockchain. Yeah. I went through some use cases, I talked to a few people, I spent a few hours. I kind of got a broad understanding of the technology, and my current assessment is that how it's implemented right now is not necessarily relevant. We don't care in digitalization whether they have the blockchain layer in Estonian information systems or not. But we also understand that, as an example, when they get at one point to the smart contract point, situation, they want to use these, they want to essentially reorganize and reconstruct their business processes conceptually. Then we need to be there, and we need to be have a watchful eye over what the agencies are doing in that sense. But that's just using blockchain as an example that it applies equally to any innovation in IT.
Okay, we had a question over here first, and then a question over here.
At the moment, we're seeing this technology being introduced because it creates a high degree of integrity, much greater reliability and authenticity. And at the same time, the European Commission is legislating for your right to be forgotten. And I'm wondering if our panel have any thoughts on how the right to have your records erased is going to impact on the use of this technology, which is designed to preserve your records.
For now, my answer is simple. If you have records which fall under the right to be forgotten, then you don't put these into a blockchain. That's it. But there are other opinions.
No, the beauty of the technology is that the hash that you are publishing, or that we are publishing in our solution, doesn't say anything about the person. It doesn't say anything about the transaction. So it's not it will not be anything that will be subject to the General Data Protection Regulation. It's hidden in plain sight. But we have to erase the document at one point. So what we are doing will help personal integrity enormously, and we can do it in an industrial scale. So we can actually make. I don't think that you should have that programmed in the contract, but I think that you can have algorithms where you actually select, okay, these customers have not been active for 7 years or 5 years or whatever, like really legislation, 100 years in Croatia. And I think that this will help. Our technology will help.
I would add, I think the right to be forgotten is technically impossible to implement. But one approach that could also apply to blockchains is, well, you encrypt information that might have any sensitivity, and then if you have to forget, you throw away the key. But, okay, that's fraught with problems, I know, but I also think the whole concept doesn't make sense in terms of how IT works, but never mind.
And back to Calder's point about agencies doing some incredibly stupid things, it is about encrypting that data in the first place and not recording it on the chain. I've seen a lot of instances where information is being actually appended to a blockchain record. So the hash, there'll be some encrypted data, there'll be a hash, but then there'll be clear text data as well. And this is a big problem with smart contract development, actually. And so it's about having good information management practices, which again, we can help with because we are, information managers, records and archives professionals. So we had a question over here, and then we have, probably that's all we have time for. Okay.
Last question.
Last question. You have the honor.
Calder, you mentioned in Estonia there were, 4 or 5 agencies that were using this technology. And in Australia too, we have agencies like our main sort of research scientific organisation is using blockchain technology. So we can reasonably expect to receive transfers of data from these agencies. At the National Archives of Australia, we often say the primary role of the archivist is to understand and document information systems so that long after these systems cease to exist, we've got the means to reconstruct them, understand how they work, therefore provide context to the records that were managed in them. When you were doing your work and the blockchain work that you've done, have you given thought to archival description of these records when they do come into custody? Are you looking at distributed custody?
Not yet. It's really one of the things about the use case. What makes it special is really the pragmatic point of view of the implementers. We have a lot of questions, a lot of issues which we need to deal with in regard to our business processes and everything else. And as such, we don't want to overcomplicate everything. We just take the most beneficial aspect of blockchain, which is currently in integrity, implementing it in a way that it doesn't disturb data privacy, etc., any of these things, and then just use it as that. So they really called it an extended digital signature. So basically, when we deal with archival description, then we can, and most probably we will, spend some time and effort to extract some technical metadata about the security mechanisms which were in place once in the agency. So we'll try to extract the technical descriptions of really what is the blockchain entry in the end of the day, put it next to the hashes potentially into the technical metadata, store it along with the record, etc., etc. But right now it's really too early to tell. The solutions have been used for the last 2 or 3 years. The information itself, which has been then blockchained, is about 2 and 3 years old. The typical transfer periods in Estonia are about 10 years. So we have a few years to discuss this.
And I'd like to mention that in the Data Market Austria project, what I didn't show today is that we're basically integrating the results from eArc, the eArc Web OAS conforming scalable archive system, with the blockchain. So it's combining the traditional archive with references to blockchain, how you do the hashes, and as I hinted at, the difficulty is figuring out how to maintain the referential integrity between those two systems. But yes, we are thinking of it.
Everything is kind of run by money, isn't it? So if there's enough money, things are going to happen. So if you look on a normal company, they have normally 10, 15, 20 systems that they're maintaining because they don't really dare to shut them down, because there might be some really valuable information that they might want to have at some point. So the service, the SaaS service, the e-archivist, what we provide to municipalities and companies is that we tap the entire database and then we convert it into something that is reasonably safe for now, like PDFA or some format that we think will last for quite some time. And then we just tap the system and then they close it down. And companies and municipalities are quite happy to do this because all of a sudden they get a lot of, well, it's really difficult to get parts to a PDP-11 digital equipment machine that they stopped manufacturing 25 years ago. And these are still running due to the scariness of losing some really important data. So there are solutions already.
But you are right to mention the transfer of records to the archives. So, for example, one of the easiest example could be to blockchain the information on the package that you are transferring to a digital archive from your system. So, in the analog world, you will not have records anymore that you could point the users to the archives. But nowadays, when you ingest this to a digital archive, you will still, if you want, keep the copy. So blockchain could ensure the users that it is the same whether they consult your copy or the archival copy in the archive. So this is one of the potential use cases.
Yeah, and I would say, furthermore, we need to think differently about how we participate in memory formation and preservation, and maybe think of ourselves as a node on a distributed memory network that is keeping that memory alive from the beginning. So we are just one, and maybe a network of these special nodes, archival nodes, that have this responsibility to society that is valued, and valued by means of a reward system that is relevant in that society, currently money. I can't predict what might happen in the future. But I'd like to thank you at this point. It's lunchtime, for your engaged interest in this session. Thank you for your questions. I have an ambition to form a global research network consisting of all of you and all of us here to really explore this technology, because I think it is not that we will choose this technology, it is choosing us, so we have to be ready and we need to influence its future trajectory. So if you care to discuss this, we're going to have some lunch and you're welcome to join us. And if you don't have time to join us today, please reach out to us to contact us, and as we try to advance our understanding of this technology. Thank you.